Welcome everyone to the September monthly meeting for Boise ITSM Talks. I'm your facilitator, Jeff Jensen. Welcome everyone again. Appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the presentation here with just a few slides. I'd like to always, first off, say thank you to everyone for taking time out of your day to attend our monthly meeting. Welcome any and all first timers. I know we had a few folks register that are first timers, and as they hopefully make it into the presentation, I know we're starting off just a few minutes late, they'll get a chance to be able to participate. And of course, thank you to Megan for joining us to deliver the presentation. Megan and I have really developed a very strong and positive relationship and friendship here over these last couple of years, and really appreciate her and have been able to not only collaborate with her and some of her previous team with some of the training I've done around the drive stakeholder value and ITIL 4 and the essence of experience stuff, but really thinking about how we can take a look at some of the things that we traditionally do from a traditional ITSM standpoint and put it into more of that customer success management audience and thinking about experience. And there's a lot of tie-in and a lot of areas where it's mutually beneficial to take a look at those things from both perspectives. And so I really appreciate Megan being here to share with us what she's been working on and how she takes a look at customer experience and the operational aspects of making that real and making it effective. And I'm looking forward to her presentation today. Real quickly, I always like to talk about the ITSM vision for the Boise group, which is we want our presentations to deliver actionable information, and these sessions really aren't just about the presentation, but we like to save time at the end for questions and answers. So I expect all of you to be thinking as Megan's presenting on questions you want to ask her. And I know she'll do a great job of delivering her presentation, but also want to have that dialogue with everyone. And our goal, our why for starting this group, we always like to start with why and take a look at the golden circle of Simon Sinek, is to inspire all of you to become better leaders, whether that's in IT or whatever organization you're a part of, and to really fill that void in service management and some of these other related topic areas. Really, we want to borrow from any and all frameworks and really think about what we can do to help our organizations move forward and do continual improvement, which I know will be a big part of what Megan's going to talk about today as well. Our presentation, as I mentioned, is operating continuous improvement for CS and CX. Megan works now for Convercent by OneTrust, and I know she'll introduce a little bit more about what she's doing in her presentation. And as she's moving forward and really building up a customer success management organization for Convercent, I know that there's a lot of opportunity to take what she's learned and to move things forward with the experience that she has, but also, again, I know she's presented in a lot of different forms. I saw her presentation at the Big Rig conference, which was about a year ago now, I guess, Megan. And I know that this presentation has a little bit of similarity with some of the things that you've talked about in the past. So I'm looking forward to having you deliver for our group today. So I'll go ahead, Megan, and stop sharing my screen, and you should have presentation rights to start things up on your side. Welcome again.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Before I dig into slides and talking, my name is Megan Macaluso. I am the Senior Director of Customer Success Strategy and Transformation at Convercent by OneTrust. So Convercent supplies ethics and compliance solutions. And so businesses that are building their ethics and compliance programs, we have solutions and services and software to help operationalize that process. We were acquired by OneTrust, which is currently the fastest software growing company in the United States right now. So for any of those of you who have been through migrations or mergers and acquisitions and had to jump in feet first into getting everything sort of brought together and running, can probably understand it's been a little both wild over the last few months, but just a tremendous amount of learning. And anytime you can step into some sort of strategic and transformational role when there's that kind of activity going on is super interesting. So just wanted to give that quick introduction. And as Jeff said, highly interactive. So feel free at any point during the presentation to type something in the chat or raise your hand. I'm happy to keep this very open as opposed to me just talking through slides for you all for the next little bit. So I will get this pulled up Let's see if my correct screen shows up. Can everybody see this? Is it the right screen? Okay, good. It's like 50-50 whether I get the presenter view or I get the real view. All right, so today we're going to talk about a couple of things. I do want to just set some context and orient a little bit around where I started with this organization, because I think it'll give just some additional interest to some of the things that we're talking about, so I can show you some practical application. And then we're going to go through vision to measurements, a couple different mapping tools, and then our holistic system. So I started here at Convercent back in January. Right before that, there was a brand new leader, a new EVP of customer success that started, and the very first thing we did was complete a maturity assessment of our operational organization. There's all kinds of different maturity assessments out there that tell you all kinds of different things. This was awesome for us because it gave us an opportunity to really see where the gaps were in our operational areas. So even before I started, as part of a third-party organization that would do these maturity model assessments, is just sort of figuring out what are the kind of like baseline areas within your operation that you want to acknowledge you're strong in or not, right? And in this, with this model, which I think at this point is probably a little bit outdated, but we have our build, operationalize, and transform, right? So transformational operations is like where you want to go and where you want to be, but you need to have those foundational build elements in place in order to really have those run in a way where you're not kind of stepping backwards to step forwards. In the world of customer success, that is things like your customer segmentation, right? And your engagement model. So how many customers do your customer success managers have? How is your organization designed and structured? Are you getting the right amount of resources to properly run your org? Are you tracking the right metrics? Do you have capability to reporting, right? So some really basic stuff. And then from there, it's like, well, what can you build with those things, right? What kind of playbooks? What can you take that's manual today and operationalize it? Are you measuring things like customer experience, right? There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but a lot of times, companies don't quite know how to get that customer feedback loop through in a way that's meaningful for the business. Do you have a journey map by segmentation? Do you have good access to your data? On and on. So we went through this maturity assessment, and Convercent is, over the past couple of years, had done a really great job of investing in their revenue operations and their development operations, and getting good systems set up around that. But the customer-facing group, which in my world encompasses all of professional services, so implementation managers, project managers, as well as customer success managers at every level, all fall under one umbrella. And what we discovered early on was that we were pretty low in our maturity. And one of the decisions that was made as an output of that review was the organizational structure that we have right now. That I would like to share with you. So our customer success team, you can see those top two, that top half of the hemisphere there, professional services on the left, customer success management on the right. I'm sure you guys work with all kinds of these folks in your world. And so that didn't change a ton. What did change was some of these items underneath. And particularly want to focus on the left bottom quadrant, which is customer experience and customer success operations. One of the things that's emerging in the world of CS is there's a recognition of how difficult it is operationally to do it. There's a lot of self-serve. There is a lot of tech touch. There are a lot of tools. There is a lot of customer data. There's a lot for you to understand about your customer adoption. Right. And so how do you run that in a way where you can forecast your churn, where you can ensure that your customer experiences are positive, that you're actually driving value for your customer, requires that operational underpinning. So my org is basically made up of groups of folks who fall into two main buckets. One is one that supports the org themselves. So this is the customer success managers. their systems, their playbooks, their processes, all things CSMs. They know the customers better than anybody. They're with them every day. And so what do they need to be successful from an enablement standpoint? And then on the other side is customer experience, which is a newer area for us to step in and say, we need to understand what does an adopted customer look like? What does customer value look like? Are we talking to the right stakeholders? Are we interacting with people at all the right levels to understand if we're driving value? If we want our customers to grow with us, how do we recognize and know when there are opportunities to do so, right? So we kind of had to start from scratch from an operational perspective, which has been a super cool role to have at a place like this, especially in a mission-driven company in the world of ethics and compliance has been very cool. So I want to start with vision to measurements as kind of one of the first tools that you can use. Any questions, comments before I move to this part of it? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna talk about vision to measurements. I'm not gonna get too deep into this because Jeff does this for a living. And so if you really want to know how to do this well, you definitely talk to Jeff because he knows every great way to facilitate these types of conversations, right? But the idea is that we had, and all organizations have, like a vision of where they're trying to go and what they're trying to achieve. And how do you get everybody organized around that? And then how do you make sure that the activities and the projects and the initiatives and the things that are going on are there to support that vision and that you have a way to measure them, right? So a couple of the benefits, it's the simplest way to collect key information that you need to organize your team around an initiative. A lot of times these things are cross-functional. And so making sure that you have a way of bringing people together across different organizations to align on your vision. To support a clear statement of work and your desired outcomes. Lots of times we spin up stuff and people have different assumptions around what that means and what that's going to look like in the end. Creating a framework for focusing on the right things and having the right conversations, right? So this helps you to prioritize the things that are being worked on and making sure that what you are working on is supporting your vision. I'm getting just a smidge of background noise. I don't know if somebody can. So unmute. Thank you, sir. It eliminates time and energy waste because you're focusing in on the right areas. And it grounds that broad vision and the measurements you need to support it so you can prove that what you're doing is the right thing. And again, like operationalizing that vision is really important. So when I came here to Convercent, one of the things we wanted to do was have a really strong operational practice. And so how do we achieve that, right? And how do you get to a place where you know what things to work on and what areas to prioritize while you're doing that? So these are the steps. These are the different steps in the vision to measurements exercise. So I'm going to step through these one by one. And by the way, if anyone has done this exercise before, feel free to raise your hand or add any commentary to this if you've seen this work well, or if you've seen it not work well. I'd love to hear about that too. And so one is defining the vision. And so what is that? And making sure that everybody is aligned on what that vision is and that it's articulated and visualized in a way that is clear to everyone. And then creating the hypothesis. So like in our case, we wanted to have a mature customer success organization. And the hypothesis was that if we created an operational practice for our business, that it would improve certain things about the business, right? And that's when you get to the part about the agreeing on expected outcomes, right? So our vision was we want an operationally mature organization. Our hypothesis, if we build a team to do it, we can get there. But then we had to agree on outcomes. And this is a huge thing because if part of your hypothesis involves spending anybody's money, then it's really important that you know what these expected outcomes are. And so for us, it was what are the metrics that we are defining and tracking to know that the things that we're doing are working, right? And I'll get to some examples of those later. But I think this is a really important piece, particularly if you're bringing in your leadership to help sponsor work and initiatives that are going on, is that there's a really clear path to something within the business that really matters. So from there, it's listing out your critical success factors. What are all of the things that you need to achieve this vision, right? So for creating our org, this was staffing, this was processes, this was tools, this was timing, this was cross-functional help, this was buy-in from my CEO, this was all kinds of stuff, right? And so you want to be able to kind of get all of that out as part of this to say, in order for us to achieve this expected outcome, this is what we need to get there. This next one's my favorite. So the identifying assumptions. People have assumptions about things, and they are the opposite of what someone else on their team thinks all the time. I just actually had a great example of this happen this morning where we're cranking out a bunch of new tech touch self-start kind of stuff. And there's like a whole cohort of customers that everybody thought this was going to, but it's not going to them, right? Like we have these little misunderstandings all the time. When it comes to something like this, it's really good to hit time out and say like, are we all in agreement about everything that we've discussed and that these assumptions are true? That it's going to take this long to hire, that we're looking at this level of expertise for a particular role, that the outcomes that we've defined have ways to like measure that are early indicators, right? Just how do we make sure to just hit pause and ensure that there isn't confusion? And then lastly is to define your next steps. And that can look a lot of different ways, right? So that could be a project plan, that could be, it's whatever you're going to take like and lift out and go organize, right? And so in our case, this is the continuous improvement model, right? Is where those next steps live and breathe. But that is a walkthrough of the vision to measurements exercise. This is the kind of work that my team puts out. So wanted to give you an example of kind of what the output is from the beginning point. So we said we wanted a mature organization. We're going to invest in it. It is going to require this. The company said, okay, go for it, right? And so these are the kinds of things that our operational team is able to produce, right? So playbooks for our CSMs, new processes, training and enablement for our own employees was really lacking, was something that we needed to focus on. Templates, tools and systems, selling enablement. Customer success often has some part to play in driving revenue, driving growth, driving upsell, even if they don't own a number. And so how are we arming them with the ability to seek out and find solutions with their customers? We also own our knowledge base. So in our case, you know, I walked in and there was a knowledge base that had not been well maintained. I don't know if anybody else in this call has had that problem, but like, it's not great when nobody wants to send their customers to the knowledge base because you can't find anything and all the articles are 5 pages long. So it was really important for us to think about our customer experience in that way and look at our knowledge base and say, how do we leverage this team and the things that we're doing to create engaging and interesting and valuable content that is digestible for the audience that's looking for it. Customer training sessions. So part of my group was, our group is setting up a customer training methodology and team, which had never existed by itself before. Customer education is a huge gap, right? If customers are not educated well on the value of your solution and how it fits in with their success criteria, it can be really difficult for them to really adopt or grow. And so we wanted to make sure that we set up something that was a group that was really there to deliberately train our customers to ensure they felt really comfortable with the system and they could tie the value into it. And then reporting, holy smokes. I'm sure any and all of us have the need and the desire and the want for more reporting, but things like access to data and, you know, smart people that can do those analytics and the way those reports need to live and breathe and who needs to look at them is a huge component of it. So I share that because this was sort of the process that we've been through, and this is what the team is producing. I wanted to give you some grounding there. Any questions around vision to measurements or comments?
Hey, Megan, it's Donna.
Yeah.
Can you give me some context about the playbooks? Who are they for? How are they used?
Absolutely. So in this context, a playbook would be for like a customer success manager. And let's say it's something simple like doing a renewal. So customer has a renewal coming up. It means there's a trigger, at 90 days ahead, customer is expiring in 90 days. Contact the stakeholder, review this customer information. By this time, there should be a quote in front of them. This is like the most basic of examples, but it's that type of stuff. It'd be like, here are things that you can put in the system and create enablement for, and kind of hand your CSMs for them to be able to deliver on that activity. So we have playbooks for things like I said, renewals, executive business review, discovery, conversations. Right now, it really is some of that more basic stuff, and it's pretty time triggered. But they can could definitely get like deeper into the weeds. Like you start talking about like a tech touch type of playbook. Like let's say you want to do something like, hey, when I see that my customer hasn't logged in for more than 3 months and now they've logged in, like I want a note to go to that CSM or somebody to like recognize, like, oh, welcome back. Like I see you back in the system. How can I help you? Things like that. So playbooks have a pretty broad, many use cases. In our case, they're pretty like process and CS enablement driven.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks.
Sure.
Hey, Megan, I've got a quick question. When you look at things from the standpoint of looking at these as finished work examples, I suspect there's probably an initial Rev 1 or something that's basically, especially if you're building some of these things in the context of a new organization or more from scratch versus, and this might be part of what you're about to talk about, I suspect, around the continual improvement piece. How do you draw the line from kind of connecting the dots between saying that these things are here, but then we're going to come back and revisit them or get feedback on them or find out from the people working inside of their customers' organizations what they need to potentially be added to in some of those types of connective points that are probably linking some of these pieces together?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, it's just like MVP all over the place right now because everything's new. So, but I mean, that is such a critical part of, and I will touch on this as part of the model, but that feedback loop, right? And so one of our kind of like core values is to be collaborating with the right people all the time. Like we can't make things in a silo, they won't be any good, right? Our CS team and our PS team know our customers better than anyone in the building. We do a lot of internal review, and then as we get customer feedback from things we kick out, yeah, it's just everything right now is definitely minimal, and we're taking feedback on a pretty constant basis to iterate. Okay, so a couple of tools that I want to walk through that we use pretty regularly. So the customer journey, the service blueprint, and then how that leads to how you can define your areas of focus, your operational strategies, and your capacity planning. So this is one of our favorite pictures that I love because when we talk about things like adoption, right? And when we think about our customers, a lot of times, like what we think about is what the company makes. But like if our customer is little Mario and we make the firepower, then what our customer should be able to do is an awesome person who can do rad shit, right? Like that's what. And so, but that's such a huge component for us is like, how do you arm your customer to be successful in the way that they need to be successful? Which is really keeping what they need in mind. And that comes back, Jeff, to really iterating based on what we know about our customers all the time. And that can come through many avenues. That can be like data that you're watching. You can launch, you can launch things like walkthrough guides in your software and look and see if people are actually getting through all the steps and completing the activities. and the way that you would like them to. Or it can be a more strategic customer where, they had certain assumptions when they purchased the solution, and are we meeting that, right? Like, are we meeting those early assumptions? Are we meeting those positive business outcomes that were expected? So, we're going to walk through this. I'm sure everyone's seen this before a gajillion times in some form or fashion. But this is a journey map. And what we're going to talk about is both the customer journey on top and the service blueprint on the bottom. And so the first thing is identifying your phases. So in this case, this is the whole journey. Like, this is an example of like tip to tail, the whole thing. Sometimes when you're doing a mapping exercise, it's like some part of this, right? Like maybe you've recognized that a change is coming. Like in our case, some of our customers will be migrating to a different platform. And so their service delivery is going to look very different. And so for us to pull things like onboarding out and look at it on its own can be a really important thing. But if you have not done this exercise with customers tip to tail, it's just a really important view to get everybody aligned. And so the top item is what the customer is doing. And then the bottom is what your business is providing from a service delivery perspective. And then of course, by the end is what we want is happy customers. And we want to know what it takes to get them there. And so we have all these touch points, right? And so working with customers and working with your team to understand where all these touch points are along the customer journey. So if you think about explore and engage, that's things like maybe, customer went and downloaded a white paper off of the website, or they engaged with some SEO content on Google, right? Like something in that area, or maybe they started talking to a salesperson, right? And then as you move through the journey, it changes a lot, right? Like I put a lot of touch points in an offer because usually at contracting, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of people involved. And especially if you're in B2B, this is huge. It's like, who's working with the executive buyer? Who's working with the administrator that's going to implement the software when this thing closes? Who are we working with in procurement to make sure that all of the documentation gets completed? Where does the salesperson fit into all of this, right? And you can do that when you know what all the touch points are at these different periods of time. So agreement, onboarding, co-creating. So this is all about value, right? So together we are creating value. And as the customer realizes that value, they renew and they grow, right? When you get that part right. But you have to get it right all from the very beginning and in as a consistent way as possible. And so customers have different feelings in these moments about how it's going, right? Like, you lose customers along this path at any time because we only have so many opportunities to touch a customer, and that woven all together is how customers create their impression of you and of the value that they have with your brand and with your company and with the solution. And so capturing those customer feelings and thoughts along this journey is really, really important. Again, there are a couple different ways that I think are really smart. Obviously, best is going right to your customers. Sometimes that can be hard. People are starting to get survey fatigue. People are, your customers don't always want to pick up the phone and answer questions about like what they like and what they don't like, right? So when you have opportunities to get that feedback and collect that feedback, get it in. Again, sometimes it's data, but the thing is, like, this is living in places and people just don't know it's there, right? And so one of the areas within customer success that we're really trying to focus on is getting that feedback loop so that we can tell marketing and we can tell sales and we can tell product when we're hearing these things from customers about what's working and what's not working. So we have our touch points and we have how our customers are going through that journey and how they're feeling about that journey. And then on the bottom part, you have the service blueprint, and you have employees and you have people within your company that are sitting in each one of these moments, right, that are providing these touch points, that are kind of running the engagement, right, that is happening with the customer at that point in time. And so who are those people? And are you looping those people together as you're creating this map view so you can understand, maybe how the onboarding impacted the renewal or what expectations were set during the sales process may or may not have made it all the way through to delivery. And now that's something to revisit, right? But kind of who owns all of these different touch points in time, and how are you bringing them together cross-functionally in support of your customer journey? And then there's what it takes to do it, right? So if we're saying we want our customer to feel happy and good along every step of this journey, here are the things I need, right? And so when we go back to vision to measurements, right, and we talk about the critical success factors, there are critical required things that the company needs to provide in order to create positive customer experiences. But you have to have a really good way to sort of define that on behalf of in terms of like a business use case and a customer use case generally, to get all the stuff that you need to do a good job there. And then that leads to things like really helps with budgeting and resource allocation. So when you know what needs to happen along each phase of the journey, you know who that belongs to, you know what you want the expected outcomes to be for your customers, you understand your customers at like a good level, and you can really define this. It is super helpful when you need to go and look at resources and look at budgeting and look at systems and people, process technology, all of that stuff to make this happen, because you have a definition of what's needed and why. And I think one of the critical things here is like, how are you measuring that? So I'm going to show you. So this is like a version of like a very simple onboarding, right? That we created. It's like, you know, the thing that I want to point out on this journey map is at the top, you'll see there's key performance indicators. That's an internal metric, right? So those are the things that like we're tracking as a business in these phases to say we're successful, right? Like we're hitting sales targets, we're getting time to onboard and time to revenue, there's high usage and there's low ticketing, there's expansion revenue coming, there's good retention rates. Like that's all stuff the business cares about, and it's all really, really important. But if you look at the bottom, like the customers don't care about that stuff. And so how do you know that you're pulling in what's important to your customers, not just what's important to your business? Because customer business outcomes will drive your corporate outcomes. So this is one version of our journey map. Like this is what I present to new people. I'm not going to go through this. It's super busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. The thing that I want to point out about this that's important is that we defined this, right? Like we defined our stages and what it really meant for our customers. We understand what our customer motions are. We know what our stage advancement criteria are. So if you're going to say a customer is onboarded or they've adopted, that we have a definition for that, and we know how to check that box. We know the teams and systems that are needed to support during each phase of that journey. And then below are metrics. So above the line are like customer value metrics. We have something called a PBO or a positive business outcome. That's a customer metric. And it's captured during the sales process, right? And it's, are we achieving your positive business outcome with our solution? And then below the lines that we care about, right? Are we getting people onboarded efficiently and effectively? Are we getting the right adoption rates, right? Is customer health good? But again, just to make sure that you're always kind of paying attention to both sides of that line of like, what are we producing for our customers and what are we producing for the business? And how do you know that you're doing the right things along this journey? How does everybody on this call feel about journey mapping? Anyone?
I don't know how I'm going to sound. I'm using a headset, but it looks really good. That's, I mean, the fact that you guys have put the thought into this process, I'm wondering if we do some, I hope we do something similar, but that looks like you guys have really thought about the steps the customer's going through, your KPIs, the stages that the company is going through and whatnot. It looks pretty good. I don't have much experience journey mapping, but I've done some value stream stuff. So yeah, it looks like a similar kind of concept.
It is. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. We might have something up here in the chat. Oh, CVM. So that was a placeholder, Donna, for customer value metric versus like an internal KPI or something like that. So in our case, and this is an earlier iteration of this slide, but like in our case, that would be like a customer goal that's captured, a customer like business outcome that's captured. And those can look different depending on who your stakeholder is, right? So the guy that bought it and decided to buy it might have a different view of that than the administrator that's in there all day, every day, that really needs to advocate for your tool. So really understanding what is valuable to all of your stakeholders here is also a pretty critical piece of it. Yeah.
And so is that something that you all formulate during onboarding with the customer?
Yes, so that's part of our handoff process. Is gathering those business outcomes and those goals. So there's a point in time where we have like where our salespeople have been working with the customer, and then right before closure, we start bringing in customer success and professional services, and at that juncture, we're capturing and bringing forth all that good information that was collected during the sales process around their outcomes.
Right.
Although to be honest, like sometimes customers don't know where their outcomes are. Like if you want to go back to like a maturity conversation, like our customers often are like, well, can you tell me what my objectives should be? Like we're doing an ethics and compliance program and we've never done this before. Like, how do you help us? And then we really have to think about, oh, we have customers that don't really know how to grow and build an ethics and compliance program. So the broader like trust that they have with us isn't really around just the technical part of the tool. It's about us being a partner and their ability to scale their program.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking about the outcomes, for your program. And I was going to ask you, did you have to have an outputs versus outcomes conversation internally? But you could say the same thing here, right? I would think you have to have a little bit of an outputs versus outcomes conversation with your customers.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's like outcomes can take time. And so it's defining like what the value is of the output, and then tracking to when they see that value. Right. And sometimes we have to really help them even understand what that needs to be. Cool. Okay, so this is big flywheel. So operationalizing continual improvement and innovation. So this is kind of the way that we view it. What I would say that's most important is that circle in the middle, which is the required behaviors. So the team that we just built, we've never had these roles before in the company. That we have a really solid mix of people that came internal from like external places. We've just been acquired, everything's bananas, and there's a high expectation for what it is that we need to achieve. And so it's really important when collaborating in that way that you encourage the right behaviors of your team, right? And so to be creative, for people to have independence, right? To be able to do and try work and not be afraid that they're gonna like fail and get in trouble, that they're engaged, that they expect to fail. This is a thing I've got to tell my team a lot. I have writers on my team, right? And I think people that write understand this a little bit, like you have to throw away a lot of what you write when you edit things. And so in a lot of like one of the things that we have to think about is like, as we're iterating, a lot of what we build won't get used or won't get liked. And we need to be okay with that. And it needs to not demotivate us. And that can be really hard. And so just having that expectation out there that like, we're going to try things and they're not always going to work. And then we're going to move on and gain what we've learned and do the next thing is really critical. Again, the collaboration piece, like you have to collaborate with everybody. If we will fail if we're not cross-functional, if we're not talking to product, if we're not working closely with IT, if we're not working with marketing, if we're not working with sales, if we're not working with everyone. SaaS is a team sport. Everybody touches the customer. And if we're not working with everybody, we won't get to the right place. And the listening and the trust piece. So doing what you say you're going to do. So that's a lot of soft stuff. But I have found that some of us have kind of grown up to have that little CYA bug on your back, or, thinking that like, if you make something and it's not perfect, that it's like a problem and it puts you at risk. And like, at least in my universe, we have to create so much collaboratively. We can't have that kind of stuff. So the brainstorm ideas with teams, this is really where our backlog comes from. We have a few different intake channels. And so we have people that can request reports, knowledge-based content, customer communication, training and enablement, all of that through like, we have SharePoint site, like people can contribute, or these journey mapping exercises. When you're doing those often have a lot of good output for your backlog. So there's both outbound and inbound ways of collecting all those good ideas. So then we have our backlog, and it's an active and visible to everybody. We use monday.com as our tool right now for where we're housing our backlog and working through sprints. And then we do our sprint planning and prioritization, and we're running 2-week sprints. And right now, like this testing piece right here. So, we're doing a ton of testing right now. So great example is, because we've been acquired and there's a lot of new sales coming in, like a lot more than we thought, brand new customers coming in. We need to automate and mechanize a lot of the ways that we work with our customers, which means a lot more self-start. It's a lot more like creating opportunities for our customers to do things independently. And this is really like one of our first passes at it. And you look at early results and you're like, well, only 30% of the people are even opening the email. Right. And if they can't get to all the other good stuff, they don't open the email, then we have to figure out something else. Right. And so we have like a very specific call about that tomorrow. But it's about quickly acknowledging like what's working and what's not working through testing. We also really like to bucket our customers by cohorts for testing purposes, just to eliminate variables, make sure we're kind of aiming everything at the right segment of customers that has some kind of like similarity involved. It's like typical best practice. And then again, that like validating or invalidating with internal retrospectives and customer feedback. So internal retrospectives are a lot easier than customer feedback. And so right now that's like some of the balance that we're trying to play is like, how are we getting a good mix of that customer feedback through data, through conversation, through surveys, all of that good stuff, through like what tickets they're opening, right? All of that. So, but this is the general way it works. And then we start all over again. And it's new enough to our lives that everybody's feeling both excited and very uncomfortable about this. But having kind of run this type of program before for other companies that are to improve their CS organizations, this is a really cool way to approach maturation of your like operational backbone. And then this is the last piece that I'll say is just always tie everything to a business result. Like if you can always back up all the work that's happening and it ties to something that like executive leadership cares about, it's a lot easier. There's a lot less uphill battle for getting resources and the time that you need to complete what you're working on. And so in our world, this looks like customer engagement scores, employee engagement scores. So if you're doing things that are for like internal employees, that's a really great data point. Time to onboarding, time to value, cost to serve. So if you're creating things that are making that service delivery component become less expensive, more broadly, like how are you able to visualize that for your leadership? Things like CSAT, NPS. Like I said, we've got these positive business outcomes that we track for our customers. So what matters to them? Are our customers growing? Are they renewing? And then if you can tie the things that you're doing operationally to the company-wide goals and initiatives, it's a good way to make sure that you're on track as well. And I think for a CX organization, if at any point, like the things that we're doing for our customers are not aligning with what the business is asking for, we have a much better argument. Because we have that information at hand. But just definitely found in working with companies on models like this that if you can tie the work that you're doing and the output to business results, you'll have a lot better luck with getting the advocacy that you want internally. Okay, well, that was my last slide. Just talked a lot. Any questions?
I have one kind of more toward the prior slide.
Yeah.
How big of an organization or group you feel is adequate? I know it's kind of vague question in ways, but
Right.
how can I think about how big of a size this group that's collaborating for the continuous improvement really needs to be? Because if you get too big and you got people all over the place, especially depending on your culture, it becomes like you're never going to get anyone or anything done. Versus
Right.
sometimes, yeah, I hate saying it, you got to be a little more strategic and say, you know what, let's go smaller, and we could kind of try to get things, the list shortened up a little and push forward if you don't include or expect to have 50 people or 20 people or whatever that would be.
Right.
I'll know how to model it based on the size.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'll tell you, before, there was a point in time where I was really certain that all of this stuff was going to need to be done through like OKRs, because I didn't have a team. I had like, it was going to all need to be done sort of as people's second jobs. But that, you know, that's wearing, you know, and you wind up with the same like 15 people on every call that are always involved in everything. And smart people get worn out really quick, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a good argument to be made that there are people that are really focused on these areas. For me, this is a group of about 12 people. And it means that there's kind of a DRI or a directly responsible individual for different components. And then sometimes we're hiring underneath that, right? So I have someone who's in charge of our like digital customer communication. And then her kind of smaller team is our knowledge base editor and our CX content writers and like our video guys. So like they're kind of their own little pod within the group. So the way that we kept it clean was really just making sure like ownership of these particular areas was really well defined. And then as the content requests or the things that we need to do, like the volume starts going up is when we start hiring more. But a part of the reason why I can keep that like that first level small is because we are just so collaborative with other parts of the business. Like they're the ones that have to give us all the requirements, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm like in a team of 12 people is great. Like it's manageable for me, which is good.
And how cross-functional is that group of 12 more or less? Like, is it like if I'm in IT operations, right, you're getting incidents and problems and you're kind of trying to get traction from development and care to say, hey, help us prioritize. You guys are opening the tickets, we're identifying the issue, but we need development to work. So it's not really new improvements, but more corrective actions. And it's kind of hard to sometimes get the right people in there, right? And,
totally.
You know, just, I don't know. Is it like if we're in IT, let's say, getting one or two from, like you said, the process documentation group, right? They probably have the most feedback because they know and understand how people are trained to use a system.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the product owner itself, if he's not really accountable, not really worth it, is how I'm thinking it, right? You become kind of like forcing the action and prioritizing based on what you know and feel and, feedback from others, but it's kind of hard to get when you don't have everybody.
It is. So I got really lucky because it was a new group and it was a strategic group. I had a lot of really smart, good people from this organization that wanted to be part of it, that came from a lot of different corners of the business. And so in some natural ways, we have kind of like ambassadors to all these different areas and people that have their kind of both subject matter experts and are part of our group that have the relationship and the visibility to other parts of the org and can bring a lot of that in. That's a huge part of it, right? When you talk about like IT, a lot of what we're dealing with right now is like, well, we want to do things digitally, which means a lot of PII stuff and data security. And, there's just a lot of stuff that we really want and need to do, but need to like work very closely with another group to make happen. It's a huge dependency. And we kind of have multiple places like that with product and with sales and with marketing. So the best that we do right now is just make sure we've got somebody like straddling both sides of the line between the work that we're doing and these other cross-functional organizations that we're working closely with.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, other questions for Megan?
So, hey, Megan, it's Lisa.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa.
What was the thing that surprised you the most? And in terms of kind of like, you thought it was going to be a lot harder and it was easier to get to?
Oh, wow. Everything's moved so fast that now I'm thinking back through. I think finding the right people, to be honest. I think the thing that always gets me is like finding the really good people to do work like this is so critical, and having a good group of people that can work together. And just the amount of interest, both like internally and externally, for people that want to do this work surprised me. Like, I know I like to do this kind of stuff, but lots of internal people that are customer facing, that really know the business, know the customer, know the product, want to get in on stuff like this so bad. You know, like the amount of time somebody's been like, we've been talking about this for 3 years, now we can actually do it.
Exactly. I mean, talk about what's in it for me. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. It's a great development opportunity for people, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say like that's where I feel, and probably the luckiest is just the team. And just the people's interest, and even people outside my org that just are like, oh, I want to be in journey mapping exercises. Like, I want to come to the meetings. Like, I want to understand what's in your backlog. Like, I want to see and know what's going on and be part of it. It's so exciting. And I didn't necessarily expect that was going to happen.
Yeah. So congratulations, by the way. I mean, since the last time we talked about this in any detail, you guys have come a really long way.
Thank you. Yeah, for you guys, I worked at a company where we did like third-party ESG, did like third-party consultation and operational work for customer, companies that were standing up their CS organizations. And then so I'd be like kind of like in and out a bit with a handful of customers, but now get to focus on it with a team, and
Awesome.
And there's a lot of good stuff going on. So I appreciate that, Lisa. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, what was the name of the parent company that was the fastest growing software company in the United States? Because I had never heard of them.
OneTrust.
OneTrust. Okay, I'm gonna have to look
I
them up.
hadn't either. Yeah, no, news to me.
Awesome.
you know how fast they're growing when you're in it, though. You're like, whoa, this one's
Yes.
really quickly. I'll tell you guys something though, is Kabir Barday is the CEO. He's 33 years old, and he, before being the CEO of this company, was a product manager at VMware 5 years ago, and spun up some really good software when GDPR was coming, and there weren't a lot of good solutions for it. And I have to tell you, like, he has a very agile-minded methodology, and I think that's part of the reason why they've been able to work so fast. He is definitely like someone at an executive level that I've seen think and work that way that I've not seen before. And you realize like, oh, this is why they can move so quick. It's because that is just in the DNA of the whole company.
Yeah.
And so that's something probably important to share with this group, is like seeing, like, it's the first time I've seen it like up close this big. And it's impressive.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, real quick, Megan, I'm going to pause because I know some folks probably have to jump right at the top of the hour and just share my screen again and go over a couple of announcements. And then for those that can stick around, we'll have a little bit more Q&A. All right. So real quick, I always like to promote the upcoming training opportunities, and the latest version of the training calendar is available on itsmacademy.com, but I try and pull in some of the main classes that we have coming up. The ones that I'm teaching, I highlight. I'm doing the Next Drive Stakeholder Value class, which is currently scheduled for mid-October. There's a new release of Certified Agile Service Manager coming the first week or so in December, and a lot of other great things in between that. We've got an Essence of Experience class on October 1st. and a lot of the ITIL intermediates. We've got value stream mapping fundamentals, a lot of good stuff here. So pay attention. And if you're interested in any of those, definitely you can reach out to Lisa Schwartz, who's here, or Donna Knapp or myself, and happy to give you more information on those classes. Our next meeting is going to be in late October because of some of the training that's going on earlier in the month. I'm going to be delivering a presentation around high velocity IT and talking about characteristics and culture. I delivered this presentation a little bit ago at our local Treasure Valley Agile community meetup, and that was well received. So I thought it'd be fun to bring that into this meeting, and might even call on a guest speaker to help me deliver that as well. So stay tuned for that. Previous recordings, including a recording of this meeting, are available out on my YouTube channel. I've got that linked here. I mentioned the Treasure Valley Agile community. They have monthly meetups, including one going on this Friday. And then the Project Management Institute Western Idaho chapter monthly meeting. Those things are listed on the events link listed here. And then Greg Sanker, who's a guest in this meeting and very well respected ITSM thought leader. He's actually, Don and Lisa, maybe you want to talk to Greg's webinar coming up for ITSM Academy this month. But the Keep the Learning On channel where he's recorded some sessions is linked here as well.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for saying that. So the 2 webinars ago, we had Mike Cardinal come in and talk about where have my processes gone. Then last month, Donna and Mark Blanky talked about, sort of IDLE 3 to 4. I forget the actual title, but it was they basically had a conversation about, where was 3, where are we going with IDLE 4, and actionable items. And out of that came the resurgence, if you will, of governance. And Donna had said to Mark, kind of as a little bit of a throw off, like, we used to hear about governance all the time. Then we didn't hear about it for a long time. Now we hear about it again. So reached out to Greg, and Greg's going to come in, and the topic is putting the go in governance. And he's really going to talk about what governance means in terms of ITSM and your programs and some actionable stuff. So sorry for the long answer, but there was sort of a progression history to get us to there.
You bet. Yeah, definitely take advantage of the opportunity to go to those webinars if you're able to attend. And those are recorded also if you can't make it and you want to catch up on the ones from the previous few months like Lisa was talking about.
Yep, they're all on the YouTube channel. So just search ITSM Academy on YouTube and you get to them.
All right, perfect. So thanks everyone for attending. Again, if you have to jump off to catch the top of the hour, appreciate all of you being here. And thanks, Megan, for presenting. If any of you do want to stick around for a few more minutes and ask Megan any additional questions, feel free to do so. I'll go ahead and end the recording at this point. Thanks again, everyone, for attending.
And I do make